YouTube, how's it going? The Goat House is back with some more free agency signing grades. We have a playlist full of all the signing grades on our channel, so check them out. This video, we're going over the recent ones, kind of going back to the Adam Thielen signing, Gardner Johnson, but the very recent ones too, like a Nicole Hardman who just signed with the Jets very recently. So we'll grade all those, break it down. We're in that part, the portion of free agency where every signing is a steal. We almost come to expect it. Not like, the first week of free agency where if it's a steal, it's like, wow, it's instantly an A+ because of that. It's a little different now, kind of how we always do it, because we're just expecting bargain deals here at this point. Live talk, news, rumors, updates, always talking numbers, scenarios with you guys on our Twitter. Link pinned in the comments for that, as well as our Discord and our sponsors you see underneath me, Liquid IV. They actually just got a new flavor that's fantastic, so check it out. We have a code GOAT for those sites. Links down below. Starting with Adam Thielen. Thielen went to the Panthers a few days ago, maybe a little more than a few days ago. We've been waiting for some signings to happen. Long-time Viking, kind of weird to see him elsewhere. Goes to the Panthers, 3-year, $25 million. This is an interesting signing, very interesting signing, because there's parts of it that I really, really love, and there's parts that I'm like, so it kind of got, overall, I like it, so we put it at a B. But what I love, like what says it's an A, out of it is, Thielen's he's a solid receiver too. But he's a smart receiver. You always hear about these young players crediting him for kind of getting them going and learning some things, but maybe keeping their heads right as well, perhaps. So I think that's what the Panthers need with some of these other young players there, and they're going to bring in a young quarterback, first overall pick. So I think that's big time, and they needed a receiver, they needed multiple. They'll probably add at least another one here. So that was good. That feels like an A signing. Overall, $8.33 million is probably, honestly, if I had to predict, I thought he'd be cheaper, but as a steal. I didn't think his value was cheaper, like talent-wise. This is pretty good based on his value. I just, for some reason, felt like he'd get a 1-year deal for way cheaper than he thought he'd get. This might be a little cheaper than he thought he would get as well. But, this isn't really in terms of the price, it seems like good value, but it's not like a crazy steal, especially at this stage of free agency. But it's not in no way an overpay, like anywhere near an overpay. So the value's pretty good. The first part, maybe more said it was an A. Value's pretty solid. I'm a little surprised by the 3 years and the structure of this contract. And the 3 years came out, and then people were like, well, maybe there's, zero dead money in the third year. That didn't end up being the case. There's just over $5 million in dead money in the third year. So what that means is they actually could clear a little bit of space if they cut him that third year. I don't like talking about cutting players when you just signed them as well. I can't really stand that talk. But anyways, and they added 2 void years on his deal, which is pushing, making him cheaper now, paying cap hits in the future when he's not in the negative, is he's not on the team then. So if you understand contracts and you saw his contract, like the actual layout of it, it tells you that they will actually be paying dead cap on, not much, but they will be paying dead cap on Adam Thielen for 5 years. So I don't love that. It's not going to kill them because it's pretty cheap, and they have future cap space, the Panthers. They want more now. That's why they did the void years. That's why they pushed the money back. So it's understandable in a way, but I was a little surprised this wasn't a 2-year deal maximum. So I don't really love that part about it, but I do love getting better at receiver, adding a smart guy like this in there for overall a cheap cost, no matter how many years it is. So like you kind of have sides that you argue an A, and you kind of have points that argue maybe a C. So that's where we ended up with the B on this one. Next, Gardner Johnson. This was maybe a little bit of a surprise. Once you start to think about it, and kind of what I've been saying about Gardner Johnson, and once you start to think about it, maybe it doesn't end up as that much of a surprise based on where he went, how much he went for. But overall, this is a really good get for the Detroit Lions. They got even better here. And they've been making some moves. I love me some Cam Sutton. They've been making some moves. I thought at that point they would have done a little bit more to find ways to not just bring back their own, but get better. More than just Cam Sutton. Emmanuel Mosley, is a decent signing, but And they made some other moves, and they've gotten better. But at that point, before C.J. Gardner Johnson, I was kind of waiting for that splash move to get even better. And then there you have it here with C.J. Gardner Johnson, a big-time player here, a big-time playmaker as well for the Detroit Lions. So right away, it comes out like the Lions, wow, and then the $8 million, wow. But once you start to think about it a little bit more, it actually starts to make a little bit more sense. First, we're in that portion of that part of free agency where guys do go a little bit cheaper. That's a small part of it. One, he goes back to a guy he's played under in Aaron Glenn, who's the Lions defense coordinator, was with the Saints. So that kind of makes the connection, kind of makes it make sense. But when he was under Aaron Glenn with the Saints, he was mainly playing just slot, like a slot corner role. And everyone thought he was maybe one of the better slot corners. No one really thought he was this crazy player like he was for the Eagles, where he was making plays all over the secondary, slot, strong safety, free safety. So he goes to a guy he played the slot role at. And we're not going to see him at free safety because Kirby Joseph is a stud. He's an up-and-comer here. But maybe they could move him around, but most likely what Aaron Glenn's going to do with him is put him in the slot where he's very good. And then you look at the $8 million, it actually makes him the highest paid slot corner in football at that $8 million. So it starts to be like, yeah, maybe it wasn't a crazy steal when it comes to the money. Unless you're factoring in Jonathan Jones or Kenny Moore, who can play the slot. Those guys get paid more, but I'm thinking those guys are more likely to play outside. So the value actually makes sense right now. And there's some people that say where he could have got more on a 2 or 3 year deal, and maybe teams probably had better offers out there. But at this point, the free agents that are still left, they accept these 1 year deals that might be a little bit cheaper because they want to be a free agent next year again, because they think they're worth more per year than what those 2, 3, 4 year deals that were offered to them. So if they get a 1 year, I'm gonna go out there. I'm gonna confident guy. I'm gonna prove it in a scheme that I know under Aaron Glenn. I'm gonna prove that I'm worth what I think I'm worth, and next year I'm gonna get that mega deal. So that's why it kind of makes sense. All those reasons on why it makes sense that he accepted it, why the value is what it is, maybe the connection, why he went to the Lions there. So it all makes sense. So at the end of the day, I do give it an A still. I mean, it's a great deal for the Lions. They get a lot better. It's pretty good value there. Maybe it's not like the insane value that people maybe kind of thought that when it instantly happened. It just depends on the scheme, I suppose. Like if he's playing for Jonathan Gannon on the Eagles again, or if Jonathan Gannon's still on the Eagles, they probably give him a crazy deal. But he's with the Cardinals. Gardner Johnson had some words on Twitter about Gannon. Maybe the Cardinals aren't really looking to get better right now, anyways. So that's probably why they didn't offer him, and that's why the Eagles didn't beat this at $8 million per year, because they got a different defensive coordinator. Do they view him as a slot guy like most of the league does, or they view him like the way Gannon does? That is where he's more valuable. Like talking about like 14, 15 million per year. Is if Gardner Johnson is playing multiple spots and really fits the defense where he really could look like a star. And that's really not, that just wasn't, I was talking about this before going into free agency, that just wasn't the case for like 90% of the league. So that's why this all made sense. This is a big time get for the Lions though. They're continuing to get better, trying to put themselves in the top of the NFC North there, which we think that they can definitely contend for. So it's a team that we're really excited about. I'm excited about their draft. They got 2 first-round picks. Big fan of Brad Holmes and how he drafts, so I'm curious to see what he does. I thought they maybe at a big-time D tackle, so are they waiting for that for the draft? It's definitely a possibility, and we're kind of getting off topic, but it's a very intriguing team to me. But do they take Jalen Carter at the top? Do they take Brian Bruzzi, maybe a guy like that in the middle of the first round? So, yeah, team to watch here for sure. Maybe they're not done yet with free agency. Next, Dalton Schultz. Yeah, this is a max value deal as well. And then Elijah Moore just got traded to the Browns. So I got to head to Twitter and get an update on that. All right, had to pause the recording there because Elijah Moore just got traded to the Browns. And what I went ahead and did, I'm going to add that at the end of this video. So we're going to talk about Elijah Moore. We'll talk about Nicole Hardman still. So we're just kind of added the graphics here at the end, and we'll discuss it. But continue on with Dalton Schultz. The Texans signed him as a 1 year, $9 million max deal. So this ends up being a pretty good steal. Similar situation to C.J. Gardner Johnson, where it's like Schultz wasn't really getting what he thought he would get. Maybe there was some offers out there that were a 2 or 3, 4 year deal, but maybe a little bit more than $9 million per year, maybe just less than what he thought he would get on a multi-year deal. So he's gonna go, all right, I'm gonna take that 1 year deal, prove everyone wrong, and that's what players are doing at this stage. They might be taking a little bit less money to play on that 1-year deal. It actually makes sense. People kind of getting ripped. Some of these players kind of getting ripped for taking less money after the fact, but maybe again they are getting less than what they thought they would get offered, but they're purposely taking these 1-year deals. But the Texans needed a tight end for that new offense that they're looking to run. Possibly bringing a new quarterback, definitely will through the draft. And then Schultz is a pretty good target, obviously, for the new quarterback. Overall, it's a guy that's, and again, it's $9 million max. Most of these deals are max. He's definitely worth that. He thought maybe he would get around $12 million, so it's a pretty good deal for the Texans. And they definitely needed a tight end in there. I think some more Texan signings in this video. Next one. Was Sean Murphy Bunting a few days ago to the Tennessee Titans, a 1-year, $5 million deal. And I talked about this before. This was kind of one of my favorite sleeper free agents. I liked him a lot out of Central Michigan as an outside corner. He's still young, obviously. And we saw him as an impact earlier years on the Buccaneers, like the Super Bowl year, mainly playing from the slot, played a little bit outside as well. And then recently, we didn't see as much from him. I think it's a little bit, because the Buccaneers were running a little bit more man coverage when he was playing well. They were kind of running a bit more cover 3 last year, so maybe they didn't really view him as a fit in that defense as like an outside or as with the outside corners, they also had Jamel Dean and Carlton Davis. It's a pretty good duo. So is he better than those guys, or as good or better than those guys on the outside? No. Do we like him in the slot in this cover 3 defense? Maybe they think Todd Bowles thinking was no. So the Titans, I think we'll see them run a bit of cover 4 still. Which to me, if corners that can run man can run cover 4, typically cover 2 as well. I think we'll see him, and they'll run some man as well, but I think we'll see him play a little bit outside. Curious to see what the Titans do. They put McCreary on the inside. They like Elijah Molden, who's more of a safety, but really a slot guy. So where are we going to see Murphy Bunting play? That's the question. If he ends up earning the $5 million and he's playing in the slot, that seems like one of the higher end paid guys at the slot. So maybe there is a little bit of risk in it, tiny bit, I suppose. But I still like his upside. I think he's a solid corner. Maybe he just didn't fit what the Bucs were trying to do. This is one of my sleeper guys for a reason. The reasons I kind of explained. I like the upside. Loved him out of Central Michigan. Still think he can play outside. He definitely can play in the slot. I think he'll fit the Titans better than what the Bucs were doing before. The Titans needed another corner, but not one that would be super expensive, because they got decent ones in there. The defensive line's really good. Some solid safeties. I don't know what the buyer talks about though right now. But it's a kind of a sneaky, solid signing here from the Tennessee Titans. So we'll see where he actually plays. Maybe a little bit outside, a little bit inside. I'm kind of thinking they try him out in the outside where he has some upside. Damien Harris signed with the Buffalo Bills. We knew the Bills were looking for a back, but specifically a cheaper back. More specifically, a kind of a power back that can handle short yardage, things like that, because they have Hines, they have James Cook, who they really like there. Maybe he kind of gets elevated to the main guy, perhaps. So they got that style back that they were looking for in Damien Harris, and he ends up being super cheap at $1.7 million on that 1 year. I know he's coming off the injury last year. You kept thinking he was going to come back, or he tries to come back, then he's out again. So that's tough. Maybe why he was cheap, but he's pretty damn talented. Obviously, Devin Singletary had a better year than him last year, but overall, who's better? I think Damien Harris is better. So, my opinion. So I think that's a pretty good addition for the Bills, kind of what they were looking for. They couldn't really afford to spend huge money. People throwing out like Derrick Henry. I don't think they were ever going to trade for Derrick Henry. Like, too expensive. They don't value the position that much. You wish they valued a little bit more, but they do get a pretty good one here. This is kind of more what made sense. I thought Leonard Fournette would have made sense as a fit. He's definitely asking for more than $1.7 million, and he might insist on being the guy. The Bills are kind of like, yeah, James Cook might be the guy, but Harris might be the guy as well. We'll see. Overall, I like that signing. So here's a bunch more. We're going to go to Nicole Hardman. He's got one of those graphics, like the recent ones, and then we'll talk about the trade that involved the Jets, Elijah Moore to the Browns, that just happened during recording this video. I mean, we're giving it to you in this video. That's how we do stuff here. So the Falcons got Matt Collins. It's a 1 year, $2.5 million deal. He had a pretty good year last year. So looking at last year, he had a pretty good year last year. So looking at last year, this is a pretty decent deal at $2.5 million. But before last year, he was probably like a veteran's minimum guy. So which Hollins are we going to get? Switching systems here. And they already had the big body targets. I thought they needed kind of a speedster guy, maybe a slot guy perhaps. So that's an interesting one. There's, with value, it looks pretty good, maybe a little better than a B, but in terms of what the type of receiver I thought they should have been looking for, and then maybe, it's not really a gamble because it's a pretty cheap deal, but could he go back to the veterans minimum value of Matt Collins? So I gave that one a B. Again, he was pretty solid last year, though. Seahawks add Devin Bush, 1 year, $3.5 million, has struggled. The Steelers traded way up to get him. There was a lot of hype on him, and he struggled a bit. But I do like the change of scenery, perhaps. The Steelers ran a lot of man coverage, so he was either in man or, playing run defense or blitzing. They liked to blitz him a bit, and he just wasn't good at blitzing. It wasn't a blitzing type guy here. So he goes to Seattle Seahawks. He's going to still play inside linebacker. He's going to have to stop the run a little bit better, but more of a zone defense where they're just really not going to ask him to blitz a whole bunch. And, could be a rotation guy, could be a starter. I think he'll be a starter to start the year. Depending on who else they bring in, and Brooks, had that injury. But I still see upside with Devin Bush, and I think he fits the Seahawks defense better than the Steelers defense. So overall, I think it's kind of a sneaky, solid one. $3.5 million is maybe it's max value, but it's a little bit more than I thought he would get. So it's kind of a positive and negative in there. It's kind of a split the difference there at the B. Bucks bring in Chase Edmonds, also gave it a B. 1 year, $2.32 million. Good pass catching back. Rashad White was kind of a solid pass catching back. Could run the ball pretty well as it kind of feels like they're going to go White. Edmonds thought maybe they'd bring in somebody that's kind of like a Fournette to kind of come in there and back up White. But overall, a decent back there. Josh Dobbs goes back to the Browns. 1 year, $2 million. Overall, I like him behind Watson. It's a downgrade going from Brissett to Dobbs, but it's a decent guy to have behind, Watson. So give that one a B+. Dolphins grabbed Dan Feeney, 1 year, $3.25 million. It's a guy with some experience. It almost feels like, we're going to bring this guy in and we're going to have him compete for a starting guard job, maybe with Liam Eichenberg, because I think Robert Hunt will start. And then, Connor Williams will start at center. So Feeney maybe battle Eichenberg for guard. To me, why I don't absolutely love... B- still a decent grade. These smaller signings, I don't like to, bash teams too much. Like, give them... It's possible to get a C, but I sometimes a little hesitant. But, go big or go home in that situation. Are you going to get better than Eichenberg or not? You're going to kind of got to get you're most likely signing a backup for $3.25 million, So, I don't know. Texans with a few signings here. Corey Littleton, 1 year, $2.2 million. Yeah, at one point he was pretty good. I thought they could go get a little bit better at the linebacker position. We are going to talk about that. They do bring in Perriman, but I thought they can get even better with their starters in general. Could this be just a special teams guy? So 1 year, 2.2. Could he have been a veteran's minimum? And then maybe could be is at the max value there, but not one I'm like super crazy about. Devin Singletary, again, that could be max value, but I thought he would be I thought Damien Harris would actually cost more than Singletary, but they bring in Singletary, and that's it's a really good running back too. I gave it a B+, a pretty good running back too there behind Dameon Pierce. Could you have been looking for more of the shifty, speedy pass catching guy to complement Dameon Pierce? That would have been a better fit. But overall, I like it. B+ for a pretty solid running back too. I thought he kind of gained off of benefited off of teams being so worried about the Bills' vertical threat passing game and Josh Allen running that. Most backs in there should be able to do some damage there. Sometimes he kind of did benefit off that, so how will it be in the Texans? They brought in Denzel Perriman, who's a tackling machine, really good run-stopping linebacker. He's not going to be super flashy other than that, but I think a solid, is coming off the injury, but solid for that. I think it fit D'Amico Ryan's offense, so I did like that one. That one's an A at a 1 year, $3.5 million. Cardinals bring back Antonio Hamilton, who was kind of sneaky decent for them. Still some upside. Kind of needed a DB out there, corner out there still. They were, lost Murphy. You do want them to get better, but they kind of had to bring somebody back like this. So 1 year, $2 million is a pretty decent deal. LJ Collier on the veterans minimum for the amount of years that he's been in, or the minimum for him, I should say, on the veterans minimum is 1.165 for the amount of years that he's been in the league there. That's what the 1.080 million is. So, I mean, it's a cheap deal. Maybe you're going to look for if you can get some upside out of this guy, perhaps. He's been very underwhelming, but I gave it a B there. The Patriots brought back Jalen Mills. They cut him. They brought him back 1 year, $6.1 million. That is max value. It's a little more than I thought he would get coming back to the Patriots, though. I thought it'd be a little bit cheaper. And again, maybe part of that, a good portion of that's probably incentives. It is, I'd say. And he, missed a little bit at the end of last year. So if he plays every game, plays X amount of snaps, then he can get that money. But it's a little more than I thought he would get, but still a decent player. Maybe another one of those players that kind of gets ripped more than he should get ripped. There's some of those players out there. And then this one, actually, I added this one in too while I was adding in the Elijah Moore trade, because the Elijah Moore, if you're listening to the whole video, Elijah Moore got traded midway through this video. I paused it, got the graphics made. For the Elijah Moore trade grades. I was going to put that at the end of this. But Austin Hooper also signed in that time, so I slid him right in here. 1 year, $2.75 million. There's more signings, like a list, like this amount of signings that have happened either before, during, after these. I just don't have the contract details yet, so I can't grade them. So still waiting on a bunch, actually. It's a little frustrating kind of waiting on those. But the Raiders signed Austin Hooper, 1 year, $2.75 million. He was sneaky productive, not crazy productive, but sneaky productive for the Titans last year. He was underwhelming the year before, the few years before, I suppose. 1 year, 2.75. It's kind of a cheaper deal, for him being, and that is base value, actually. It's a decent deal for him being sneaky productive last year. My issue is, the Raiders get rid of Waller, and they're going to kind of get to patch it up with a bunch of average is generous, below average guys. And what about Foster Moreau sitting out there as well? They bring in O.J. Howard. They bring in Austin Hooper, Hooper kind of looked like a pretty decent blocker at one point, but that is why the Titans didn't bring him back. Actually, he was not a good blocker for them. And then, O.J. Howard's not going to be much, of a blocker in there as well. So, and I thought that was kind of valuable in Josh McDaniels' system. So the plan maybe is to have one of them, fill that role. They kind of got sneaky pass catchers. They're not great pass catchers is what they got. So, you move on from Waller, who's more of the pass catcher. So I'm, what is their plan here? I mean, I know what their plan is. It's to kind of patch it up with some just below average guys, perhaps, and just not value the position a whole bunch. But, you kind of need more of a blocker in there as well, I think. So that's kind of what I mean by what is their plan. But going back to a very recent signing, and this will go into the Elijah Moore trade that we're going to get to and grade here in a second. But the Jets bring in Nicole Hardman. 1 year, $6.5 million, and overall value is pretty damn good. Like value, I instantly want to give this an A, because I thought he'd go a little bit more than that. And then another positive is, maybe you could use a gadget type receiver. He's a little more than that, but a gadget type receiver in an Aaron Rodgers offense, because you have Lazard, who's a blocking guy and a downfield guy, and you have Garrett Wilson, who's a do-it-all guy. I mean, the guy's a stud, obviously, going into his second year. So you get my point. So you can kind of use a guy like this, and maybe he's a little more of the end-around screen pass guy than Elijah Moore is. And again, he can do more than that, but maybe he's a little more, because I think you kind of need a guy like that. You can benefit from having a guy like that in any offense, but in Aaron Rodgers' offense as well. Kind of stretches the field out a little bit because you're worried about those downfield guys. So that's a positive too. It makes some sense. Maybe why it stops from being an A, and this actually kind of goes into the trade that we'll talk about as well. But making sure nothing else happens. Nothing happened. But would you rather have Elijah Moore? I could actually argue that you would. Mecole Hardman coming off the injury, coming from the Chiefs, usually those guys, are they going to be as productive elsewhere? And he should have Rodgers as quarterback, so that's great. And Moore still had a lot of upside. He was sneaky productive given the quarterback mess. Now, how would he have been with a non-quarterback mess? And Aaron Rodgers, if we think, at quarterback, there. So that, and he's got a 2-year deal for very, very cheap, like $2 million per year, still on that rookie deal. Nicole Hardman, 1 year, and it's max 6.5, but he could probably reach that coming off the injury. So for those factors, I would rather have Elijah Moore, actually, who I still view as a ton of upside, but Hardman's a pretty solid player. So could you have kept Elijah Moore for cheaper and then just not sign Hardman there? That's a possibility. So that doesn't factor in a whole bunch. You mainly look at the player and the value here and the fit. Like we talked about, in that Aaron Rodgers offense, you can use a guy like this, and you get pretty good value here. So, but it is a 1-year deal coming off the injury, but I still gave it a B+. I really like the value on that one. And then going into the trade that just happened during recording this, the Browns get Elijah Moore, a 3rd-round pick that is 74th overall. The Jets get the 2nd-round pick, the Browns' 2nd-round pick, 42nd overall. So the Jets will actually be picking back-to-back there because the Browns' pick was right next to theirs in the 2nd round. Right when the Jets signed Mecole Hardman, I was talking about this, basically hinting at that Hardman's kind of a slot guy, more and more of a slot guy. So could he be out? That ended up being the case pretty quickly, actually. And I was also talking about that I would trade a day 2 pick for Moore because I'm high on the upside of Elijah Moore, what he can be. And he's been sneaky with a mess at a quarterback position. I don't mean who is playing quarterback and how they're playing it. More so, this guy's in, that guy's in, you're in, out. That's a mess at quarterback. It's hard to kind of get things going as a receiver. Give you more credit to Garrett Wilson. Basically, I was talking about this on Twitter too, just a little while we were kind of getting the graphics whipped up for this. Taking a look at the trade value chart, the draft trade value chart. The value on this exact 2nd-round pick and this exact 3rd-round pick, the difference was equal to like the 3rd pick in the 3rd round. So that is where Elijah Moore got valued in this trade, a very, very, very early 3rd-round pick. And I was kind of thinking, I would trade a day 2 pick is what I tweeted earlier for him. I was thinking like the middle 2nd at the earliest, middle 3rd is possible. Kind of pushing it back there is kind of where my value would be. And then his value ended up being early 3rd if you kind of compare everything and look at the trade value chart. So that kind of made sense to me. A somewhat early 2nd-round pick was given up in the process here. As you can see, the Jets get the 42nd overall pick, but it is a swap. So grading the Browns here, I gave them an A. I like Elijah Moore. You still have to view him as kind of a prospect. I loved him as a prospect. He still has a lot of upside. He was kind of productive these couple years with, given the situation, given the mess at quarterback, and to go play for Deshaun Watson. So they do give up a 2nd-round pick, but they get the 3rd back. And I love the fit too. They needed a kind of a speedster guy in the slot. Cooper more of an outside receiver. They were kind of missing somebody like this. And then you factor in like, all right, you could have got a big time player. Well, they couldn't really spend a lot of money because they're mainly because of the Deshaun Watson contract, but other contracts. Big contracts as well. They are, they're not looking that pretty in future cap space. They got to build the team through the draft or through cheap young players. And here you go. You add a receiver that you like that is also going to be cheap this year and next year, like around $2 million in terms of the cap hit. So that is perfect. That's why they're in on a guy like Jerry Jeudy, who is a bit better, but it's going to cost a bit more. The Broncos wanted a 1st-round pick. A solid receiver that has upside still, but on a cheap rookie deal, and the option next year would have been, it's more pricey than the rookie deal, but it's actually way cheaper than the other guys from that draft class on that option. Justin Jefferson, like way cheaper, guys like that. CeeDee Lamb, another guy. So it's a fit on multiple ways. The type of receiver they needed, talented, but in terms of financially as well. So that made a lot of sense. Overall, the value is good. You don't even have to give up a draft pick. You swap picks. He was essentially valued as an early 3rd-round pick in this way, which I agree with. Some people may not. I agree with, but valued as an early 3rd-round pick without giving up a pick. You don't gain or lose a pick here. So that might all make it sound like an A+. little hesitant with that because there is a little bit of risk. I mean, you do give up a second round pick. Again, you don't lose picks in this scenario, which I like, but you don't pick until that third round pick. You don't pick for the first 2 whole rounds. And Elijah Moore, again, for him to kind of demand a trade and kind of voice his frustrations on Twitter the way he did, I didn't really love that. I'm not going to make a big deal about it. But then him wanting out as well, maybe there is a little bit of risk. And then him, statistically, again, he's been sneaky productive, but maybe he's been a little underwhelming. I'm not really worried about it, but maybe for all those reasons, there is a tiny bit of risk. So I couldn't quite give it the A+ that the value kind of says it is. But I do like this for the Browns, mainly because I'm actually high on the upside of Elijah Moore. I think it's a fantastic fit on the field and financially. For the Jets, a little tricky to grade. This is actually the highest. I end up giving them the highest I was possibly going to give them. I was in the C+, B- range. So I actually kind of gave them the higher part there. So the first way to look at this on what the good part about this is, besides you move up into the second round, you pick twice in a row, which should be fun. I guess it's not all about being fun, but in the second round, I guess that could be the positive for the Jets here. But the big positive here is you got Mecole Hardman, and then you moved up into the second round for a different receiver. So you kind of replaced him already with Hardman, a pretty decent slot receiver. That should play well with Rodgers, perhaps. Maybe you could argue they didn't really need this guy, so you go Hardman and you move up into the second round. So looking at it that way looks great. It almost looks like, B+, A-, kind of getting in that range for me. My issue with that is, I kind of already talked about, I would probably rather have more, over Hardman, but the main issue is Hardman's on a 1-year deal. He's coming off the injury. Is he going to play every game this year? Are you done with him after a year? Moore had a very team-friendly, and Hardman's will be team-friendly off of 1 year, but $2 million per year cap, just over $2 million on 2 years left on his deal. Still had upside. Would have liked to see him play with Rodgers because he had 400, 500 yards last 2 years with an absolute mess at quarterback. He could have been a 1,000-yard receiver in my opinion. I know there was still some Jets fans that they're kind of holding out hope they wouldn't trade him because there's a lot of, that was a steal of a draft pick. It felt like a lot of upside. So that's where I would kind of argue, even though that's still present, that, okay, we got the replacement with Hardman, a pretty good guy here, and then we went up, in this second round with this guy, who we already replaced with Hardman. So looking at it that way is good. My way to argue against that is, the smaller part is me arguing that I'd rather have Elijah Moore because he's younger, has more upside, 2-year deal. I left that, but yeah, mainly it's the deal. It's the Hardman might only be around for 1 more year, where the team friendly 2-year deal existed with Moore. So that was kind of the part there that kind of dragged that thinking down. And then also, I don't love not gaining a pick. Like, we just, Elijah Moore, a lot of hope, a lot of upside. We know the talent's in there. We just felt like maybe you're saying we stole him in the draft a couple years ago, and we didn't even gain a pick. Like, yes, you moved up to the second round. You picked twice in a row. And that's why, we'll get into that, why I kept it because overall, B- is still like a decent. I could get a B- on a test. I guess depending on who you are, it's still it's still a kind of good grade. So, but we'll get into why I didn't, decide to go with the C range. But I didn't love that they didn't gain a pick for Elijah Moore. I would have rather, and that's kind of the issue. The Browns didn't pick till late in the third round. I think it was, if at all. So they couldn't really get an early third on what his value was. So they had to kind of make it equal to it. But I'm more of a guy. Everyone's different. I'm more of a guy to. He actually, is more valuable than an early third. Well, and it's a swap of picks. So it's like not like you gained the early third. You got a second. You didn't gain anything. So I didn't really love that. But so that almost knocks it down. The first portion you kind of argue is like kind of in the B+ range. The next portion you're arguing is kind of like maybe in the C range. But the reason I kind of kept it in the highest end I was possibly going to keep it or grade it as B- was because, they do have 2 early second round picks. Now, and not from this, but one from this, one they already held, and that's good for like a Rodgers type team because your window is now on an Aaron Rodgers team, which they have to get him first. But let's just say they get him. Your window, it does make you somewhat of a contending team now, but your window is now like you got to win something big in the next year or so. forget that early third-round pick, having another early second-round pick. So look at the first-round pick. Let's get we'll get a tackle because Aaron Rodgers needs to be protected. They definitely need another tackle. And then, but you can't really predict the draft either, So maybe they don't get their guy. They have 2 early second-round picks to maybe get that other tackle or that tackle, or maybe you already got that tackle with the first pick. So you're basically getting more starters because you're a win now team. So that's the positive. That part of it is actually the best looking part. People argue the best looking part was they replaced him with Hardman, and which is okay. It's a good part, but again, Hardman is a 1-year deal here, and he's coming off that injury too. And then on top of that is the Chiefs. He was so perfect with that Chiefs Mahomes offense, Andy Reid offense. You got Nathaniel Hackett in here. Is he going to be as useful? Maybe he will. I'm not saying he definitely won't be. It's possible, but I think the biggest part here is you have 3 picks within the top 45 or 43, whatever, 42, whatever it is. 3 picks. So that is more for a win now team, which the Jets are about to become. So that part of it actually makes sense, and that part of it is definitely why it should stay in the B range there. So it's definitely not a bad deal for the Jets at all. I think there was more value in what the Browns did, and I do love the fit. So definitely an interesting trade here, and I'm glad we got to include this in this video. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Definitely an interesting one. It got stopped in the middle. I had to pause it in the middle there because that trade happened. But hoping, I like today. There was some signings that we had this trade, so hopefully more of this stuff happens, and I'm excited for what's to come. We have you covered fully. We have a playlist full of the signing and some trade grade videos, and then we have a recent mock draft, which things change now because the Jets got that 2nd-round pick. But we'll have more NFL draft coverage. That's right around the corner, so hopefully you can join us. That's going to do it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.